to Clint and Sean on Sack Heads Radio, radiating elegancy and quality.
And we're back here on the Sack Heads Radio Show, 347-205-9399, if you want to join the show. Sacco hopefully will be here to take phone calls. He ran out again.
I'm proposing a new rule.
Okay.
You know how we have company policies and procedures?
Absolutely. We have our own here at the Sack Heads Radio Show.
Well, of course we do.
SHR Media mandates it.
So, we do?
Yeah. The two guys that own that are jerks.
Right.
I mean,
but they're really good looking and fun to talk to.
I just wish they wouldn't wear Speedos to every single meeting. I think that's the most bizarre thing.
No. Remember, we switched to singlet.
I just threw up in my mouth a little.
Are you smuggling plums in there? What is that? Remember?
You're like one of those ball bearings.
What is that, a Vienna sausage and plums? That's cute.
Thank God nobody's listening the night before Thanksgiving. I think it's great that we're going to come out of this and then read an amazing historical document written by the first president of our republic.
The visual was awesome. And hey, next time to the staff meeting, I say we bring the Crisco and baby oil.
All right.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, the only way we ever solve differences on the show is Greco-Roman wrestling anyways.
That's true. Remember when Sacco was the only one that wanted that one thing, and so we said, okay, you got to wrestle both of us for it.
You know what? I realized why Sacco's not here right now.
Why was his mouth open the entire time?
He's a mouth breather.
You know what? But that actually turned into the scene from Borat when they're wrestling over the stiff mic. Anyway.
Sacco's not here tonight because I pushed on the show that we may play the knockout game with Sacco.
Maybe Sacco's wife plays the knockout game on him, which is why he's not here
and
right now.
It would make a lot of sense, actually. I would, too. Please,
anyways,
continue.
I have an idea of our policies and procedures, and we're going to bring this up at the next meeting. I say we scrap the whole thing, and we just use general orders issued by General George Washington.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
All his general orders, like whatever his general orders were, is now company policy.
We'll have to start pulling those and finding how we're going to apply them to each and every segment.
Right, like no swearing.
Right.
But I don't like that one because then we could never have Rooster on the show ever again. And I'd probably have to miss 3 out of 4 weeks.
I'd end up having to put you in the stocks for hours after every single show.
Right.
No cursing. Good job, Clint. We're 3 minutes into the new show. Oh,
wait a second. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to have pants on.
No, you're not.
Okay. Really, we're going to follow that bit with George Washington's Thanksgiving Proclamation?
Yes, and you have 25 minutes.
You, sir, have 25 minutes.
I do.
This is actually a tradition that I started in my house.
Yes.
And I believe you picked it up.
I did.
Your house as well.
After discussing it with you several years ago when we first met, yeah.
So this is something I read, and Sean as well, at the beginning of Thanksgiving, as we sit down to Thanksgiving dinner. And it's I would, this is a historical document, historical proclamation written by President George Washington at the request of Congress on October 3rd, 1789. So I actually tested the theory one time and had my daughter take this to school. And that was interesting to say the least. But let me read the proclamation because this is a proclamation issued by the President of the United States at the request of Congress. So what it says is, by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor, and whereas both houses of Congress have, by their joint committee, requested me, quote, to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many and signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness, end quote. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being, capitalized, who is the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favor, able interpositions of his providence in the course and conclusion of the late war, for the great degree of tranquility, union, and plenty which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one now lately instituted for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed, and the means we have of acquiring and diffusing useful knowledge, and in general for all the great and various favors which he has been pleased to confer upon us. And also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all the people by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, especially such as have shown kindness to us, and to bless them with good governments, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as he alone knows to be best, given under my hand at the city of New York, the 3rd day of October in the year of our Lord, 1789. George Washington.
For the record, that applause was not necessarily as much for your reading as it was for George Washington's writing.
George Washington's writing.
You read it beautifully, though.
Clapping out also. I was going for that George C. Scott kind of thing. I don't think I quite...
Well, you had the helmet on, and I thought that was kind of cool.
This is not a helmet. This is a stormtrooper mask.
But you have the weird is you have the twin Colts on your hips. I didn't understand why. That just didn't match the stormtrooper mask.
Yes, it does.
First of all, I challenge you to find in history another, especially in the last 50 years or so, and there's a couple out there, a couple of any other legislator or president or government employee who could write such a beautiful proclamation with such meaning, such depth, all the way around. That it was far from the day where anyone would dare shout out separation of church and state.
Well, obviously. I mean, this is, here's the thing. Now, this is obviously false because our founders were atheists. They clearly believed in, they were deists. They weren't really religious at all. They didn't believe in God per se as a being that took part or played any sort of role in human affairs. And clearly this proclamation bears that out. Oh. Listen, clearly there's a separation of church and state as written in that one letter by Jefferson that the left has so championed as being law. Congress would never want the President of the United States to issue a proclamation by joint committee recommending to the United States a public day of Thanksgiving and prayer. Oh wait, I just read that.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just read.
But listen, they wouldn't have done that if they really knew or understood the Constitution.
They wrote it.
Listen, but you're not understanding, Sean. Okay, you're not understanding. Their level of education was so low back then, and George Washington was such a simpleton that he did not understand, nor did they understand what it was they were writing. Okay? They just put the words down. Clearly they wanted the separation of church and state, but they didn't even care enough about the principles that they established to follow it.
No, that's exactly what they did.
You're not seeing the point.
I am seeing the point.
You know how ridiculous the liberal argument was? And the teacher actually like had an issue with this until when the teacher says, the Thanksgiving Proclamation. I said, do you really want to fight this fight? That was a proclamation, historical proclamation issued by the first president of the United States at the behest of a joint a committee of Congress. Do you want to take that on? She couldn't read. She can't read a historical document in school.
Right.
Let me refer you to the Northwest Ordinance. So
yeah, but we've seen this happen more and more, where historical government documents are moments in history by this nation that are great, that have the word God in it, or anything of that nature, automatically get. I mean, you look at how they're trying to pull out any sort of religious article and statement out of courts and out of anywhere that has the federal dollar in it, and state dollar a lot of days. And it's amazing to me how the left continues to do that and continues to argue. And listen, like I said before, if you don't believe in a higher power, that's on you. You have that right, and I respect that right. I look at guys like Penn Jillette, who is an atheist, but he believes in the founders and he believes in the Constitution, and he respects why they wrote what they wrote. He just doesn't believe. That's fine.
And let's look at really what he was talking about. I mean, he wasn't just offering like a non-denominational prayer for the country. That's not only what he was doing, but I mean, he talks specifically about political, moral, and intellectual blessings, right, from God, that make our form of government possible. A form of self-government, right? Not for the collective, not any kind of tyrannical
mob rule
or straight democracy mob rule, right? Self-government. But in addition to that, he talks about personal and national repentance and forgiveness, and he talks about nations forgiving us and our transgressions, and there's such depth to it, and you don't hear. I haven't heard anything like this, obviously, in a long time, which is why I think this piece is particularly important around Thanksgiving time, which is why this to me, this speech ranks up there with his retirement from military service when he resigns his commission. It ranks up there with his farewell address. It's a very important piece of history, and I think that this particular proclamation gets overlooked a lot by government, by the American people
in general. Yeah. Well, and I find it amazing that they held their president, or they held him in such high regard, that the entire Congress said, hey, we want you to write this. We want you to do this. We don't want some poet, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but we have such faith in your ability to put to words how we feel, that we want you to do this on our behalf, on behalf of the nation and to the nation. And I think that is amazing. And, we can learn a lot from that time and from how they looked at that president. And listen, we say it all the time, as much as we dislike the policies of this president, and oftentimes people confuse that with we don't like him, even though we've said a million times on the show that's not the case. We respect the presidential office. We respect the office of the president. I respect him on certain accounts as being a family man, and I believe he is.
I believe him to be a good family man.
Yeah, I believe that
the relationship he has with with Michelle
or
his children, but from everything I've seen, heard, read, I mean, he seems like
a good family guy.
Good family guy, absolutely. Yep. I take nothing away from him.
It's his politics that we take umbrage with, and as much as everyone loves to confuse that, that's the way it is.
You're a racist.
Exactly. Oftentimes, people throw out anything they can to belittle the political argument into, like I said, racist or any other word. But
we do that sometimes out of fun.
You know, when you go back to and you look at his approval rating, why it's so low now, and we talked about, the president with the highest approval rating a couple weeks ago was George W. Bush just after 9/11. That was a time.
That must drive liberals
insane. I love to throw that out. But at the time, the nation was in a moment of healing. And whether you liked Bush or you didn't like Bush, after 9/11, he the first couple of weeks he really took charge of the nation. He really let it. You watch his speech to Congress about going after terrorists. Everybody stood and applauded him. I know everyone's against the Iraq war now, but they weren't back then. Nobody in that House of Congress on either side argued with his speech back then. But
you sure Biden didn't?
No, I'm positive Biden didn't.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Huh. They all applauded it. But the nation as a whole had a common goal. We had to heal as a nation. We were just attacked. We had to find the people that did this. And I can remember we've talked about this before, but the unity of the masses after 9/11, politics fell off the table quick. It wasn't about politics. It was about taking care of our fellow citizens. So you throw that back to when this was written. The nation was healing. We just came out of the Revolutionary War. The country was unified. Well, not just, but we were, you know what I mean. The country was unified. There was that common goal that we spoke about earlier. It was about expanding our freedoms. It was about building our nation. And there was a guy at the helm who everybody had faith in as a president. They may not have liked him personally.
As a leader.
As a leader. No, most people did. But what I'm saying is, I'm sure there's a couple people that didn't like him as a person. I'm sure there's a couple people. Guy named Hank.
Besides Benedict Arnold.
All right, so him. But, and a guy named Stu that did his dry cleaning. But what's... and I'm sure there was a couple people that disagreed with him politically, maybe not as a whole, but they did.
Jefferson.
You look at the writings and they'll tell you there was disagreement, but they all knew
they had a common purpose.
They had a common purpose, and they knew he was the man to lead them there and speak for them, and they trusted him as a president. No matter what side they were on, they trusted his actions.
Well, they didn't really have sides per se, but you said he was the man.
Yes.
So is he the original man? So people say it's the man.
When they
down. Let's think about this. I want to take.
Are you asking me if Chico hung out with him?
George Washington's a man. The man has kept. No.
Not the man to keep people down, but if someone's like, man, he is the man.
Oh, like that.
That's George Washington.
George Washington. Okay, so it's not like okay. I got you.
But they had a common goal, and I wish our politicians would look back now at what happened then.
They won't. And I want to look. He's asking for in this proclamation something that I have not heard a president do in my lifetime, and that is asking him, capital H, asking God to forgive or to pardon our national and other, which I take to mean personal transgressions. He's asking for forgiveness on behalf of the nation if we've done anything as a nation to offend. Or when's the last time you've heard that?
Well, and I think, though, what people confuse is they get into this, the group salvation or the social justice, and I think they try to push those two together as, we have to apologize for ourselves. We need this communal salvation, blah, 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 blah.
Collective salvation.
Collective salvation, yes. Correct. And he, I believe, is asking as himself to forgive the transgressions of the nation instead of asking as a nation. Instead of, you know what I mean?
We may then unite and beseech him. So he's saying on behalf of the nation, but Congress asked him to do that as well. So it's the nation, and he is asking on behalf of the nation at the behest of Congress for forgiveness. So as you have the head of government, you have the head of the federal government, who's of the executive branch, and you have Congress. So a joint session of both houses, right? So state representatives and the people themselves, because the Senate back then was actually a real Senate.
The state.
And those three come together, and so you have all branches of government, with the exception of the judiciary, I guess, but the representative forms asking for forgiveness. It's very powerful for me. So look, if you're looking for a good Thanksgiving...
Wait, are they asking for forgiveness because they were rich, careless aristocrats? Why would they be asking for any sort of forgiveness?
Well, on behalf of the little people.
Yeah. Okay. That makes way more sense now. It's amazing, and I know we've talked about this a billion times in the last segment, but it's amazing how the liberals hate the founders so much, and what they paint them as.
Did you hear how hateful the words I just read
when you really look into what humble individuals they were and how they believed in individualism helping the nation versus the collectivism, and it's amazing to me how anybody can confuse the matters other than...
It's purposeful distortion.
Thank you.
It's purposeful distortion.
Thank you.
In order to keep people ignorant, because if they're kept ignorant, they're easier to control and manipulate.
Right, with free money, free health care, free checks, free whatever you want.
And misinformation.
Absolutely.
So, look, if you're looking for a good Thanksgiving Day tradition or something to start with your family, I do this, Sean does this. You can just Google George Washington's Thanksgiving Proclamation, and you can find it, print out a copy of it, and something you can start at home.
Yeah, I think it's, either in addition to the prayer or in lieu of the prayer, or even while some people are reading, or, while you go to the store, you can read it.
See, I don't let anybody eat while I'm doing it. Matter of fact, I threw a pretty hard bread roll last year and knocked the fork down. I've happened to be pretty accurate, so I knocked the fork right out.
Which is weird because you throw like a girl.
Out of my uncle's, and not this. Actually, we did like a Boston pitcher. So yeah, like a girl.
Yeah. Who has the win this year?
The World Series.
What does that prove? Oh wait, that's the ultimate. Yeah. That doesn't matter.
It proves a lot. Never mind. Forget I said anything.
Ken from the Exceptional Conservative Show said liberals do not hate the founders. This is in the chat room. They adore Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and FDR.
I agree with the second half. I disagree with the first half in that my niece she was, I brag about her. She's awesome, but she had all honors class and so forth, and she actually had an American history teacher in an AP college level class say that the founders were all rich, dead rich white guys, and they were insignificant. All he said in the class about George Washington was George Washington. He wasn't the how should I say it, brightest man in the world. John Adams, all you need to know about him is alien and sedition acts, and just really glazed through the founding era. And I said, what else did he say about George Washington? She said, that's it. I said, what did you read? She said, we did. That's all he said about George Washington. He didn't read. And they didn't start studying the presidents. They studied Abraham Lincoln, obviously, but they studied Woodrow Wilson in depth. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States was their textbook. So, of course, I bought her a copy of A Patriot's History of the United States.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Well, why wouldn't I? And it was great. I guess her and her teacher actually got along, but she made him look like a knucklehead a couple times. So he tells the class that all of the founders were rich, white, slaveholding guys. And so she said, all of them? And he said, yes, all of them. And she tells the story better than I can. And she said, well, what about Samuel Adams? And he says, well, yeah, Samuel Adams. And she said, that's weird because Samuel Adams was dirt poor. He was so poor that the town had to have a collection for him in order to buy him a decent suit to go represent them. Oh, and every time he was given a slave, he freed that slave on the spot, never held slaves. Oh, and George Washington freed all his slaves in his will upon his death. Oh, and the big controversy at the time was he tried teaching them that, slaves were 3/5 of a person. And she said, yeah, but that was for census to keep the number of pro-slavery representatives down in the South, and ultimately, and I guess she shut him down like several times, but that's what happens when you actually know history and didn't just go to Berkeley or something and regurgitate whatever's
thrown out at you. Well, and I think it's funny, too. I had a niece a couple of years ago who was in a political history class, and I guess she eventually said to the teacher, if you're not going to teach anything that really happened, why are we here? And they did not get along for the rest of the
This is totally a SAC class.
So I think she had to retake it. But this is not, and I'll tell you, as much as I love history, and I had a pretty good knowledge of history before a couple of years ago, as I got older and started to really pay attention more and more, I'd never heard of this proclamation through high school. I'd never heard of it. The only way I originally heard of it was about 10 years ago. I had a friend of mine, not you, though obviously you and I have discussed it. I had a friend of mine who was reading the writings of George Washington in a book and said, hey, have you ever heard of Thanksgiving Proclamation? I said, no. And he told me about it, and I just was blown away. And it adds, it adds to the brilliance of the man, if you really look at it.
The guy who was reading the writings?
Yeah.
Absolutely, because only brilliant people read the writings of George Washington, let's be real. That's not who you were talking about?
Both. How about both? I'll just do both for that. Well, I appreciate that was a history of the George Washington Thanksgiving Day Proclamation. Read it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your loved ones.
Start a family tradition.
Yeah. Share it with liberals.
Share it with liberals. That is the best thing you can do. So what I've done also is I've made several copies, and Planned Parenthood loves it when you throw a stack of these
in their free reading section.
Doctors' offices love it. Schools absolutely love it.
Schools adore it when you throw stuff like this at them.
You know what? Go into a Democrat's office and hand it to them and say, have you found Jesus? They love.
You know what we should do? We should get it written on the front and the back of a T-shirt. And you know how they have those T-shirt guns that you see at sporting events where they shoot the T-shirts all over the place?
Yeah.
Wait for the next either Democrat rally,
Berkeley bus,
any sort of large rally, parade for this, parade for that, and just start shooting them in because, you know, they love free crap.
They do.
So if you can give them these T-shirts, they would be so – you educated them, which they love. You educated them about real American history, which they are just fanatics over. You gave them a free T-shirt, and if that means that you shot them at 8 feet away with a gun in the face, accidents happen. It's only a T-shirt. It doesn't hurt.
A T-shirt gun.
Yeah. That's what I said, a T-shirt gun.
You said shoot them at 8 feet.
No.
I don't want anybody to think that we're hate mongers.
I hate that we have to clear things up like that.
Hate monger.
I would never, ever do that.
Unless somebody
was trying to kill me, and then that's a different story. Or someone I love or somebody, right.
Just something I had to do.
But, yeah, I think that's a great way to outreach. We need better conservative outreach.
They would look at that and say, they just believe in magic.
I do.
Jesus is magic.
Have you ever seen David Blaine jam a nail through his arm? It's pretty amazing.
I tried that once.
Didn't work out so good.
It did. Did you know that stuff hurts?
No.
It was weird.
Right. You would think a 12-inch long spike would just sink right through. I mean, needles go in without a problem.
I know it's an illusion.
I know it's an
But when I did it, it wasn't an illusion.
Oh, man, the stitches weren't either. I can just picture you at like 15 years old in the garage going, all right, I can do this. If Copperfield can make an elephant disappear, I can make this go through my arm. Dad! Yes.
Tourniquets go between the gunshot wound and the heart. It does not work for head wounds. Because you got to tie it around the neck, and that doesn't work out so well.
Yeah, I learned that, I think, in my CPR and first aid class.
Yeah, I learned it the hard way.
I just thought it was weird that somebody shot you in the ear.
And I tried to tourniquet it.
Right.
They said, did you try and convince this? I said, no, I just was trying to see if I could apply a tourniquet to stop the bleeding.
And then it was a water gun that did it. It was a really weird day for you.
It was actually a Nerf gun. I'm a little old for water guns. Let's be realistic. So okay.
You're never too old for water guns.
I have to tell you about this Nerf war. So I have a Nerf gun.
Yes.
Have you seen the Nerf gun that runs off of D batteries?
Yes.
Sets up on the tripod?
Yes.
So,
is it belt fed? Is it the belt fed one? Yes.
So
we're gonna start getting those in the office.
We do.
Okay.
So I had a bunch of kids over at the house. It was a big party, and they all were bringing their Nerf guns over to have a big Nerf gun fight.
Awesome.
They had no idea
that you were gonna unload.
That I had the Big Daddy. And so I laid down in the hall, just perfect. I just laid that thing right down the hall. Come get me.
Blap, 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 blap.
Best thing in the world. You know, it feels so good being a full-grown adult and lighting up a bunch of kids and just making them cry and leaving little dark dents in their forehead.
Dark dents.
It was the best thing ever. And then I stood up and I gave a huge roar and I charged them.
And then yelled in your face a bunch of times. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Trophy. Right, I mean, I wore like a Burger King crown, and I'm the king.
I'm the king. I have a like story.
And all the parents said I was a jerk, and I said, well, come on, you want some? Great.
Then I went outside, flattened all the air in their cars.
I threw beer bottles in your windshield.
It was a blast.
It was the best day ever.
I don't even know whose birthday party it was.
I don't know whose house it was.
But the next time I show up to one like that, I'm doing it all over again.
So it's kind of like wedding crashers. So I just decided to crash little kids' birthday parties. You should try it sometime.
I'll give it a shot. Hey, we're against the break. 347-205-9399 is the phone number. We'll be back in a few here on Sack Head's radio show. Ding dong, who are you, Surf Guy? Slap, 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 slap.